Zal was a 16th century northern Israel Kabbalist and mystic, and one of the most influential on the whole school of Kabbalah, especially in the last 500 years. And he describes an interesting lesson that comes out of the story of the two sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, on the occasion that they walked into the Mishkan, into the temple, inebriated. They had taken some sort of substance, and the Torah describes that when they walked into the Mishkan in this inebriated state, a fire came down from heaven and killed them. And the Arizal, amongst many commentaries, but the Arizal has a particular point to make, says that their intentions were good. They didn't come in drunk because of a big night partying. They'd used some sort of substance in order to get themselves into a heightened state of consciousness, if you will. And the Arizal says that that what they were doing in that state was bringing an Eish Zar, a foreign fire. This foreign fire was some sort of sacrifice that was not permitted, and they'd brought it in an enlightened, awakened state. But the state that they were in was a selfish one, in that they had wanted to enter into this state in order to have a greater spiritual experience within the temple. And the Arizal says that although their intention was pure, in that it was all about the spirituality, it was not correct because it was about their experience in the spirituality. And this concept of zar, of being foreign, is that they had taken a selfish approach to their service in the temple. They were not just doing the service, but they wanted this great mystical revelation. And the Arizal learns from this an interesting idea that goes all the way back to the beginning of Genesis, when Adam and Eve are formed, and Eve and Adam come apart. They're separated physically, and the Torah describes about Eve that this one will be called woman. And the Arizal learns out of this that this one indicates that there was some other feminine entity in Adam's life prior to Eve. And there's a whole deep commentary that goes into the ideas of Lilith and the relationship, the negative relationship that Adam had with Lilith, and particularly its focus on that relationship being one of complete hedonistic selfishness. It was about individual sexual pleasure, as opposed to the relationship that Adam would go on to have with Eve. What does all this have to do, though, with circumcision? So, when Abraham is commanded to circumcise himself, and late in the Torah when the Jewish people are commanded that every male should be circumcised, it's called a bris. Bris doesn't mean circumcision. Bris means covenant. And it's a really, really interesting term. And it's an interesting idea. Why is removing the foreskin some sort of covenant? So the Arizal draws from this other area that I just quoted, an idea that he says that when a person removes their foreskin, when a person has a circumcision, it actually diminishes a level of sexual pleasure. And he says not only that, it allows the male to feel, on some level, a greater physical contact with his female partner. Now, that is because, the Arizal says, that is important because what this means is that the sexual experience, while still being extremely pleasurable, is more easily an other-centered experience, where it's not just about my pleasure, it's not just about my experience, but actually this is about your experience, this is about our collective experience, us going through an act of not only love-making, but actually creation. And so by removing it physically, it allows for an other-centered experience in the bedroom. What does that have to do with the bris, with the covenant with Hashem? I'll come to in one moment. Conversely, the Arizal brings from another area of his teachings that when a woman has her period, in Jewish law, the couple practice abstinence for that time. And one of the things that Arizal says is that this is a time that a woman is going to become more focused, correctly so, on herself. She'll be experiencing pain. There are hormonal changes, although he doesn't describe it as hormonal 500 years ago. He has other words, but there are hormonal changes, there are emotional changes. There is just a general physical feeling which brings a woman's attention more to herself at that time. And he says, and at that time, when she's going into herself and being with herself, it's not a time to then also demand of her to be other-centered, in that it's a time for her to be alone. Why should she also have to now be focused on the other one's experience? So there are times that we have to be self-oriented and other times that we be other-oriented in the human experience. And so he says, what we can see from sexuality is that pleasure is wonderful and it's an important thing because it's a measure of something. However, the pleasure experience in the bedroom is not the goal, but rather it is to pleasure the other. It is to give the other an incredible experience. And when you're in that other-centered state and you go into the process of creation, of the masculine and feminine energies coming together, then what is birthed is altruism. Now, he takes this a step further because this whole idea of intimacy in the bedroom is also a metaphor of creation. It is the coming together of the masculine and feminine. It is the coming together of Adam and Eve. And when they come together, when masculine and feminine come together, it creates something else. This is the mimicking of Hashem. There is nothing and there is something, although not quite the same with human and any form of procreation. So what does this have to do with the bris? So when the bris is had, when the circumcision is had, it sets a mindset for the male that we're taking what is actually the source of one of the greatest forms of pleasure, and we're saying, it's not about your pleasure, it's about the other. And Hashem says, it's not just about the other in context of partnership in life and society, but it's actually about the other, as in, it's about the great context in which Hashem has created you, Avraham. Hashem's created you people. We exist in Hashem's context. There is something that Hashem wants from us. And there's nothing wrong with having a pleasurable experience while alive and experiencing that which Hashem has destined for us. But it's not about gaining that. Hashem says the covenant is live in the world that I've created and let's be partners. You be one character and I'll be the other. I will create the world and you will do the mitzvot. And so this covenant, by taking such a physical part of the body that represents so much, is actually one of the greatest reminders that there is nothing that our whole point and our whole drive is actually to be in context of something greater. And every time we think about our own hedonistic, we have to correct that and say, yes, but no. Or no, I don't want to, but yes, I will, because it's about something greater. In Kabbalah, the masculine member is called shalom, or yesod. And what that, yesod means foundation. It is the lowest, it is the final sphera before creation and existence. Shalom, which does mean peace, and harmony also means wholeness. And so what it's a description of, because it is the initiation process within a sexual encounter that leads to creation and wholeness. In the metaphor of humankind and Hashem, we are the feminine and Hashem is the masculine, and we create together. It's a metaphor that is being stretched because we don't want to be literal at all when we're talking about the metaphors that describe Hashem and the people, but it's used in Kabbalah to make a point. Hashem, being the masculine, took the first initiative, as in there is that first seminal contribution, and then the feminine of receiving and then incubating and developing a pregnancy, and that is Hashem creates the world, and we, the feminine, then nurture it. We grow it, we refine it until it's ready to be given birth. So what this idea of the circumcision is actually a celebration of the human capacity to be other-centered and Hashem-centered in every aspect of our life, and not to be like Nadav and Avihu, not to be like the two sons of Aaron that did it for their own personal pleasure, but rather along the way enjoy the pleasure. Remember, it's not about the personal pleasure. It's about the context in which we live and what it is that Hashem wants from all of us. The eternal covenant, the divine partnership between the husband and wife, the two partners, Hashem and the person.